Now we're going to be working with sharpening filters, and I've downloaded the two files, and in the file name I indicated the filter we're going to be using, and we're using the filters that allow you to adjust the settings. There's several different sharpening filters, but 3 of them do not let you adjust anything. So we're going to go ahead, we're going to choose the Smart Sharpen one first, go to Filter, Sharpen, and Smart Sharpen. And you'll notice that it does have a nice little preview window. And then up at the top, there's also a preview box. Now, if that box is turned on, then it's applying the sharpening to your image. If you want to be able to kind of compare, turn preview off. Okay, because that actually will show you what it looks like with the sharpening, and you can kind of compare it to what it looked like without. Now in this top section, the radius determines the number of pixels around the edge that are affected by the sharpening. And typically you're going to have a number between 1 and 2. If you make the radius too big, then it does not look good. Instead of correcting the photo, you're actually distorting the photo, and that is not really the purpose of sharpening. So we're going to pick something between 1 and 2. I will leave it up to you exactly what number, but it should be somewhere between 1 and 2. Reduce noise lets you get rid of kind of any static that's in the picture. Sometimes certain conditions, you'll have some static in the background. If you move the slider, you will notice that you are going to have more blurring, because that's how it's getting rid of static. So in this particular image, I'm just going to have it at 0, because there really isn't any static in this picture. Now, the nice thing about Smart Sharpen is that you can customize the shadows and the highlights. Okay? And in the shadow, you can tell it that you don't want the sharpening quite as intense in the shadow area. Okay? And that's what the fade amount does. Okay, so the filter is applied, but it's not as intense. The tonal width restricts the sharpening to the darker tones in the shadow. So small numbers here, it's looking at the darkest areas, and then you're kind of loosening that up and pulling in more as you go towards the right. Now, it may be helpful at this point to turn on preview and look over here, because you can actually see more of the dark and the light areas over there. So you can adjust this, kind of a matter of personal preference. The radius determines the size of the area around each pixel. That determines if it is a shadow or a highlight. So if you have the setting really low, it's not going to be looking at that large of an area to determine light or shadow. Likewise, if you came way over here, it's looking at a huge area to determine if it's light or shadow. Okay, so I don't usually mess around, with radius too much. It would really depend on your image. Your highlight section has the exact same settings as the shadow, and it pretty much works the same way. So if the fade is 0, you're not lessening the intensity at all in the shadow or in the highlights. And as you increase the number, it's lessening the intensity. And typically the sky is a highlight area, but you just have to kind of look for the lighter areas. Maybe the beach is going to be affected on this one. The tonal width works the exact same, but smaller values on this one are restricting the highlighting to the lighter regions. Okay, and then you're kind of loosening that up and broadening where the highlighting is being applied by moving the slider. And then radius works the exact same way. It's the size of the area around each pixel that is used to determine if this is a highlight or a shadow. So let's turn off preview. So that's what it looked like. And then with our changes, and you can see I'm just kind of left dragging in here so I can kind of see what they look like. It looks like with the changes. I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And then I'm going to save the file. And in case you guys are wondering, yes, this was taken from Mackinac Island. We have quite a few pictures from there in this class. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to close the file. Make sure you save it. And then that brings us to the other sharpening that we're going to be doing, which is the unsharp mask. And it's usually abbreviated USM. So we're going to go to Filter, Sharpen, and Unsharp Mask. And this has a pretty simple little interface. So if you're kind of new to Photoshop, this might actually appeal to you because it's a little simpler than the one that we just looked at. But basically it sharpens by identifying pixels that are different from surrounding pixels. It increases the contrast, making the darks a little darker, making the lights a little lighter. And let's see. The amount determines the amount of increase in contrast between the pixels. So if you have the amount really low, it's not going to do much to the contrast, which means it's not going to make the lights really lighter or the darks really darker. So if you want that increase in contrast, you're going to bump up the amount. The radius determines the number of pixels around the edge that are affected. So higher values are going to give you a thicker edge. And that actually looks more like a distortion than a correction. So like the other one that we were looking at, anything between 1 and 2 is typically used for radius. And then we have threshold. This is how much different the pixels need to be before they are considered an edge. So 0, everything is sharpened. And the higher the threshold, the less sharp your image is going to be. So if I move it over here, we turn off preview, you're not going to notice a whole lot of difference between the two, okay? Because as I move the threshold, it's doing less and less and less sharpening. So I typically have my threshold around 0 because my whole purpose for coming in here was to sharpen my photo. Okay, so I usually have a low threshold, radius between 1 and 2. Okay, and you can kind of play around with the amount a little bit, see what you like, and click OK. And we're going to save that one as well. And then you can close it.